The autumn rain had been falling steadily for 3 days in Seoul, turning the bustling streets into rivers of neon reflections and hurried footsteps. Min Soo-jin clutched her portfolio tighter against her chest as she navigated through the crowded sidewalk near Hongdae, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles that seemed to appear from nowhere. At 25, she had learned that dreams in Seoul came with a price, and hers was measured in instant noodles, part-time jobs, and the constant fear that her savings would run out before her big break arrived. She was running late. Again, the art gallery owner had specifically requested to see her work at exactly 6 o'clock, and Soo-jin's phone showed 5:47 p.m. as she quickened her pace. This wasn't just any meeting. Kim Gallery represented some of the most promising emerging artists in Seoul, and somehow, miraculously, they had seen her online portfolio and wanted to discuss a potential exhibition. Her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and terror. What if her work wasn't good enough? What if this was all just a polite way of rejecting her in person? Lost in her anxious thoughts, Soo-jin didn't notice the traffic light had changed. The crosswalk signal blinked its familiar white figure, and she stepped into the intersection, along with dozens of other pedestrians. The rain had intensified, creating a curtain of water that made everything beyond a few meters look like a watercolor painting left in the rain. That's when she heard it, the screech of tires against wet asphalt, sharp and desperate. Time seemed to slow as she turned her head to see a delivery truck sliding sideways through the intersection, its driver frantically trying to regain control on the slick road. The truck was heading straight for the group of pedestrians, straight for her. Soo-jin's body froze. Her mind screamed at her to move, to run, to do something, but her legs felt like they were made of lead. The portfolio slipped from her numb fingers, her precious artwork scattering across the wet pavement. She could see the truck driver's face through the windshield. Young, terrified, his mouth open in what must have been a shout of warning. Then, suddenly, she was flying, strong arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her completely off the car ground and carrying her backward with such force that her feet left the pavement. She felt herself being pulled against someone's chest, felt the warmth of another person's body shielding her from the cold rain. Together, they tumbled onto the sidewalk, the stranger's arms still protectively wrapped around her as they rolled away from the intersection. The truck slammed into a light pole where she had been standing just seconds before. Soo-jin lay on the wet concrete, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Above her, through the rain and her own shock, she could make out a face, a man's face with dark eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies of concern. His black hair was plastered to his forehead from the rain, and there was a small cut on his cheek that must have happened when they hit the ground. "Are you hurt?" His voice was deep, gentle, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Not entirely. Seoul, perhaps from somewhere in the south. His hands were still on her shoulders, steadying her as she tried to sit up. I think I'm okay," she managed to whisper, though she wasn't entirely sure. Her whole body was shaking, whether from shock, cold, or the lingering adrenaline, she couldn't tell. You saved my life." He helped her to her feet, his touch careful and respectful. Now that she could see him properly, she realized he was probably around her age, maybe a year or two older. He wore a simple black jacket over dark jeans, both now soaked through from the rain. There was something about him that seemed almost otherworldly. The way he moved with such quiet confidence, the way his eyes seemed to see everything at once. "Your portfolio," he said suddenly, and before she could respond, he was gathering the scattered pieces of her artwork from the wet street. Each page, each carefully crafted illustration, was now soaked and probably ruined. Her heart sank as she watched him collect them with the same gentle care he had shown her. "They're destroyed," she said, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "My whole future was in that portfolio, and now—" "No," he said firmly. Holding up one of the illustrations, a watercolor painting of Seoul's skyline at dawn. The rain had caused some of the colors to run, creating an almost dreamlike effect. "Look at this. The water has made it even more beautiful," Sometimes accidents create the most extraordinary art. She stared at the painting in his hands, seeing it as if for the first time. He was right. The rain damage had created swirls and patterns that she never could have achieved intentionally, turning her realistic cityscape into something magical and ethereal. "I'm Kim Min-jun," he said, carefully placing the artwork back into her portfolio. "And you are?" "Min-soo Jin," she replied, still somewhat dazed. I don't know how to thank you. You literally saved my life." Min-jun shook his head. Anyone would have done the same thing. But Soo-jin knew that wasn't true. In Seoul's fast-paced world, most people were too focused on their own lives to notice when someone else was in danger. This stranger had not only noticed, but had acted without hesitation, risking his own safety to protect hers. "At least let me buy you coffee," she insisted. "Or dinner, or something. Please." For a moment, Min-jun looked like he might agree. His eyes met hers, and she saw something there. A longing, perhaps, or a sadness that seemed too deep for someone so young. But then he glanced at his watch, and his expression changed. "I'm sorry," he said, backing away slowly. "I have to go." "Wait!" Soo-jin called out, but he was already disappearing into the crowd of people who had gathered around the accident scene. She tried to follow him, pushing through the cluster of onlookers and emergency responders who had arrived, but it was as if he had simply vanished into the Seoul night. She stood there in the rain, clutching her damaged portfolio, staring at the spot where he had disappeared. Around her, the chaos of the accident continued. Police cars, ambulances, concerned citizens offering help to anyone who needed it. The truck driver, thankfully, appeared to be uninjured, though badly shaken. But all Soo-jin could think about was the mysterious man who had saved her life and then disappeared without a trace. The gallery meeting was forgotten. How could she think about her career when someone had just changed the entire course of her life? She walked home in a daze, her mind replaying every detail of those few minutes. The strength of his arms, the kindness in his eyes, the way he had spoken about her ruined artwork, as if he could see beauty where she saw only disaster. That night. She lay awake in her tiny studio apartment, listening to the rain against her window, and wondering who Kim Min-jun really was. She had never believed in fate or destiny, but there was something about their encounter that felt larger than coincidence. Why had he been there at exactly the right moment? Why had he known exactly what to say about her art? And why had he looked so sad when he said goodbye? The next morning, Soo-jin did something she had never done before. She took her water-damaged artwork to the gallery anyway. Kim Gallery's owner, an elegant woman in her 50s named Ms. Park, examined each piece with growing interest. "These are extraordinary," Ms. Park said, holding up the rain-damaged cityscape. "The technique is masterful, but more than that, there's an emotional quality here that I rarely see in emerging artists. This piece, especially, it's as if the rain has revealed something hidden in the painting, something the artist might not have even known was there." Soo-jin felt her cheeks warm. "Actually, that effect was accidental. I was caught in the rain yesterday, and the water damaged several pieces." "Accidents," Ms. Park mused, "often reveal truths we didn't know we were looking for. I'd like to offer you a solo exhibition next month. Are you interested?" Standing in that gallery, accepting the opportunity she had dreamed of for years, Soo-jin couldn't help but think of Min-jun's words. Sometimes accidents create the most extraordinary art. Wherever he was, she wished she could tell him that. He had been right about more than just her paintings. The exhibition was scheduled for November 15th, just 3 weeks away. Soo-jin threw herself into preparing new pieces, but she found that every painting somehow contained elements that reminded her of that rainy evening. Figures in rain-soaked streets, mysterious strangers disappearing into crowds, the play of light and shadow that could hide or reveal depending on how you looked at it. She titled the exhibition Vanishing Point, a term from art that described the point at which parallel lines appear to converge and disappear, but also a reference to the man who had appeared in her life for just a few minutes and then vanished completely. As opening night approached, Sujin found herself scanning every crowd, studying every face, hoping against hope that somehow Min-jun would appear again. She had even tried searching for him online, but Kim Min-jun was one of the most common names in Korea, and without more information, it was impossible to find the specific person who had saved her. The gallery opening was more successful than her wildest dreams. Critics praised her work, collectors inquired about purchases, and other artists approached her with collaboration offers. But throughout the evening, as she smiled and thanked well-wishers, part of her attention was always on the door, waiting for a familiar figure to walk through. He never did. As the weeks passed, Sujin tried to focus on her newfound success. The exhibition had sold out completely, and Ms. Park was already discussing her next show. Art magazines featured her work, and she was invited to speak at several universities about her unique technique of incorporating accidental elements into her paintings. But late at night, when the excitement died down and she was alone with her thoughts, she would find herself wondering about Min-jun. Was he an artist too? A student? Did he work in one of the countless offices that towered over Seoul? Was he even real? Or had her shock from the accident somehow created an imaginary guardian angel? Winter arrived early that year, blanketing Seoul in a pristine layer of snow that transformed the city into something from a fairy tale. Sujin had moved into a larger studio apartment, one with actual heat and windows that didn't leak when it rained. Success, she discovered, was wonderful, but somehow hollow when you had no one to share it with. It was on a snowy evening in December that she decided to return to the intersection where the accident had happened. She told herself it was for artistic inspiration. She was working on a new series about memory and place, but deep down, she knew she was hoping for another impossible encounter. The intersection looked completely different, covered in snow. The damaged light pole had been replaced, and new safety barriers had been installed. Sujin stood on the corner where Min-jun had pulled her to safety, remembering the feeling of his arms around her, the warmth of his body against the cold rain. "I thought I might find you here." The voice came from behind her, so familiar that for a moment she thought she must be imagining it. She turned slowly, afraid that sudden movement might make the voice disappear like a mirage. But there he was, Kim Min-jun, wearing the same black jacket, his dark hair now dusted with snowflakes. He looked exactly the same, as if no time had passed at all since that rainy night in October. "You're real," she whispered, and then immediately felt foolish for saying it. "I'm real," he confirmed, stepping closer. "I'm sorry I disappeared that night. I had reasons." "What reasons?" she asked, and then quickly added, "Not that you owe me an explanation. You saved my life. You don't owe me anything." Min-jun was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to memorize it. "I saw your exhibition," he said finally. "Vanishing Point. It was beautiful. You were right to trust in your art. You were there." Sujin's heart raced. "I looked for you every night. I hoped. I stayed. In the shadows," he admitted. "I wanted to see how your work had developed, but I couldn't. I couldn't let you see me." "Why not?" The question came out more desperate than she intended, but she was past caring about pride or playing games. "Min-jun, I've thought about you every day since the accident. Not just because you saved me, but because there was something about that moment, something I can't explain." Snow continued to fall around them, muffling the sounds of the city and creating a cocoon of intimacy in the middle of the busy intersection. Min-jun looked like he was wrestling with some internal battle, his jaw tight with tension. "If I tell you something," he said slowly, "will you promise to listen to the whole story before you judge?" Sujin nodded without hesitation. "I'm not from Seoul," he began. "I'm from Busan, originally. I came here 2 years ago after something happened, something I'm not proud of." He paused, watching her face for any sign of judgment. When she simply waited for him to continue, he took a deep breath. "I was engaged to someone. Her name was Young Hai Won, and I thought I loved her. We had been together since university, and everyone expected us to marry. The wedding was planned, invitations sent, everything arranged. But 3 days before the ceremony, I realized I couldn't go through with it. Sujin felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her expression neutral. It wasn't that I didn't care about her, Minjun continued, but I realized that what I felt wasn't love. It was obligation, comfort, the easy path that everyone expected me to take. So I left. I came to Seoul with nothing but a suitcase and the knowledge that I had broken someone's heart and disappointed everyone who cared about me. That's why you disappeared that night, Sujin said, understanding dawning. You thought I would judge you for running away, wouldn't you? He asked quietly. What kind of man abandons his fiancée 3 days before their wedding? Sujin considered this carefully. A man who was honest enough to admit he didn't love her the way she deserved to be loved. A man who chose difficult honesty over comfortable lies. Minjun stared at her, clearly not expecting that response. You could have married her and made both of your lives miserable, Sujin continued. Instead, you gave her the chance to find someone who would love her completely. That doesn't make you a coward. It makes you brave. Tears gathered in Minjun's eyes and he looked away quickly. You don't understand. In Busan, my family, they won't speak to me. Haewon's family considers me a disgrace. I lost my job, my friends, everything. I've been in Seoul for 2 years and I still feel like I'm running away. From what? Sujin asked gently. From the fear that I'll hurt someone else, that I'll make another mistake and destroy another life. The snow was falling harder, now, and Sujin realized they were both shaking from the cold. But she couldn't bear to end this conversation, not when they were finally being honest with each other. Minjun, she said, stepping closer to him. The night you saved me, you told me that sometimes accidents create the most extraordinary art. What if the same is true for life? What if the mistakes we make, the accidents that happen to us, what if they're not disasters but opportunities to create something new? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw hope flickering in his dark eyes. I've been working as a night security guard, he said quietly, at an office building in Gangnam. It's why I was walking through Hongdae that evening. I had just finished a job interview for a day position, a position I didn't get because I couldn't provide references from my previous employer in Busan. What kind of work do you want to do? Sujin asked. I studied architecture, Minjun admitted. I used to dream of designing buildings that would make people feel something. Beauty, comfort, inspiration. But that seems impossible now. Sujin felt her heart breaking for him. Here was someone with talent and passion, held back by shame and fear. Show me, she said impulsively. Show you what? Your designs, your dreams. I want to see what you create. Minjun shook his head. I don't have anything to show. I gave up on that when I left Busan. Then start again, Sujin said, firmly. Right now, tonight. Come with me. Without waiting for his response, she grabbed his hand and began walking toward her apartment. Minjun hesitated for just a moment before allowing himself to be led through the snowy streets. Sujin's new studio apartment was warm and bright, filled with canvases and art supplies. The walls were covered with her paintings, some from the successful exhibition, others that were works in progress. Minjun stood in the doorway, taking it all in. This is what success looks like, he said wonderingly. This is what taking risks looks like, Sujin corrected him. 3 months ago, I was eating instant noodles for every meal and wondering if I should give up on art entirely. The only difference between then and now is that I stopped being afraid of failure. She pulled out a large sketch pad and a set of pencils, setting them on her kitchen table. Draw something, she commanded. Anything, a building, a room, a doorway. Just create something. Minjun approached the table slowly, as if the pencils might bite him. I haven't drawn in 2 years, he protested. Then you're overdue, Sujin said simply. She busied herself making tea, giving him space to work without feeling watched, but she couldn't help glancing over occasionally, and what she saw made her breath catch. Minjun's hand moved across the paper with growing confidence, creating lines that seemed to flow like music. He was designing what looked like a small house, but not just any house, one with large windows that would let in maximum light, with spaces that seemed to invite conversation and contemplation. "It's beautiful," she said when he finally sat down the pencil. "It's just a sketch," he said dismissively, but she could see the pride in his eyes. "It's hope," she corrected him. "It's proof that you haven't lost what makes you who you are." They sat at her small table, drinking tea and talking until the sun began to rise over Seoul. Minjun told her about his childhood in Busan, about the buildings that had inspired him to study architecture, about the dreams he had abandoned. Soo-jin shared her own struggles as an artist, the years of rejection and self-doubt that had led to that rainy night when they met. "I need to tell you something," Minjun said as the first light of dawn filtered through her windows. "That night I saved you from the truck. It wasn't entirely selfless." Soo-jin raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to explain. "I had been walking around Seoul for hours that day, thinking about ending everything. I was tired of being alone, tired of feeling like a failure, tired of running from my past. I was seriously considering—" He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Soo-jin reached across the table and took his hand. "But then I saw you, in danger," he continued, "and suddenly nothing else mattered except making sure you were safe. In that moment, I remembered what it felt like to have a purpose, to be needed. You saved my life just as much as I saved yours." They sat in silence for a moment, hands intertwined across the table, watching the sun paint Seoul in shades of gold and pink. "What happens now?" Soo-jin asked finally. "I don't know," Minjun admitted. "I'm still the same person who ran away from his wedding. I still don't have a job or a real future. I can't offer you anything except yourself," Soo-jin finished. "Which is all I want." The weeks that followed were like something from a fairy tale. Minjun began visiting Soo-jin's studio regularly, bringing architectural sketches that grew more ambitious with each passing day. She encouraged him to contact design firms in Seoul to apply for positions despite his complicated past. More importantly, she helped him see that his experience in Busan, painful as it was, had taught him valuable lessons about honesty and courage. "You made a difficult choice to avoid living a lie," she told him one evening as they worked side by side at her table, she on a new painting and he on designs for a community center. "That shows integrity, not cowardice. Tell that to the architectural firms who won't hire me without references," Minjun said wryly. "Then we'll find another way," Soo-jin said with characteristic determination. The other way came from an unexpected source. Ms. Park, the gallery owner, had been following Soo-jin's new work with interest. The paintings she was creating now had a different quality, still technically excellent, but infused with a warmth and joy that hadn't been present before. "You're in love," Ms. Park observed during one of their meetings. Soo-jin blushed, but didn't deny it. "I'd like to meet him," Ms. Park continued. "Any man who inspires such beautiful work must be special." When Soo-jin introduced Minjun to Ms. Park, the gallery owner was immediately intrigued by his architectural background. It turned out that she had been looking for an architect to help design a new gallery space in Insadong, something that would blend traditional Korean aesthetics with modern functionality. "I can't pay much," Ms. Park warned, "but it would be a chance for you to build a portfolio here in Seoul. And if the project goes well, I have connections in the architectural community who are always looking for fresh talent." Minjun accepted the project, and what followed were some of the most intense and rewarding months of both their lives. By day, he worked on the gallery designs, often consulting with Soo-jin about how natural light would affect the display of artwork. By evening, they would cook dinner together in her small kitchen and share their progress. He with blueprints and structural plans, she with paintings that seemed to grow more vibrant with each passing day. The new gallery opened in the spring, 6 months after their reunion in the snow. The design was everything Ms. Park had hoped for, a space that felt both intimate and grand, where traditional Korean architectural elements created a perfect backdrop for contemporary art. The opening night was attended by some of Seoul's most influential figures in art and architecture. Standing in the gallery that evening, watching critics and collectors admire both the space Min-jun had designed and the paintings she had created, Soo-jin felt a completeness she had never experienced before. But more than professional success, she treasured the sight of Min-jun speaking confidently with other architects, his eyes bright with enthusiasm for his work. "He's remarkable," Ms. Park said, appearing at Soo-jin's elbow. "I've already had 3 inquiries about his availability for other projects." "He is remarkable," Soo-jin agreed, watching as Min-jun explained some detail of the gallery's design to a group of interested listeners. "And you two make quite a team," Ms. Park continued with a knowing smile. "Art and architecture, beauty and function, emotion and structure. It's a perfect complement." Later that night, after the last guests had left and they had cleaned up the gallery, Min-jun and Soo-jin walked slowly through the empty space. Their footsteps echoed softly on the polished floors, and the carefully positioned lighting cast their shadows in long, dramatic lines across the walls. "A year ago, I never would have imagined this," Min-jun said, stopping in front of one of Soo-jin's paintings, the rain-damaged cityscape that had started everything. "Which part?" Soo-jin asked, moving to stand beside him. "Any of it. This gallery. My career starting over. You..." He turned to face her fully. "Especially you. You know what I never would have imagined," Soo-jin said, stepping closer to him. "That the worst day of my life, nearly getting hit by that truck, would turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to me." Min-jun reached up to touch her face gently. "I love you," he said simply. "I know I should probably say it more romantically, with flowers or music or..." Soo-jin silenced him with a kiss. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "And this is perfect. This gallery, this moment, us. It's all perfect." As they held each other in the gallery they had created together, surrounded by art that told the story of their journey, Soo-jin couldn't help but marvel at the strange paths life could take. A traffic accident that could have been a tragedy had instead been the beginning of everything beautiful in her life. A man who had seen himself as a failure had revealed himself to be exactly the partner she had never dared to dream of. "What are you thinking about?" Min-jun asked, noticing her distant expression. "I'm thinking about accidents," she said with a smile. "About how the things that seem like disasters can sometimes be the best thing that ever happened to us." "Like rain damage on a painting?" he suggested. "Like a man who saves a stranger and then disappears without a trace," she countered. "I didn't disappear," Min-jun protested. "I was just temporarily invisible." "Well," Soo-jin said, pulling him closer, "you're very visible now, and you're never disappearing on me again." "Never," he promised, sealing the vow with another kiss. Outside the gallery windows, Seoul sparkled in the spring night, a city full of millions of stories and infinite possibilities. But inside their perfect space, surrounded by art and architecture and dreams made real, Min-jun and Soo-jin had found something rarer than success or fame. They had found each other, and in doing so, had discovered that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most unlikely accidents. The gallery would go on to become one of Seoul's most respected spaces for emerging artists. Min-jun would establish his own architectural firm, specializing in buildings that brought communities together, and Soo-jin would continue to create art that captured the magic of everyday moments, the beauty that could be found in unexpected places. But none of their future successes would ever matter as much as that snowy December night when 2 lost souls found each other again, proving that some vanishing points aren't endings at all. Their new beginnings, invisible until the moment you're brave enough to look for them. Years later, when people asked how they met, Soo Jin and Min Jun would smile and say it was an accident. But they both knew the truth, that the best things in life, the most precious and unexpected gifts, often come disguised as disasters. You just have to be brave enough to see the beauty in the chaos, wise enough to trust in the possibility of new beginnings, and patient enough to wait for the right person to save you from the rain.